Tell a little bit more about who you are, what you do, to kick us off.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Hi, everybody. Again, as Mandy said, my name is John Thalheimer, and I am a leadership coach, a leadership developer, and I spend a lot of time helping organizations with their training and being prepared, preparing them for like how do we train people, and then coming in and doing training as well. And I think it's such an important topic, and I'm glad that we're talking about it today and kind of bringing that out. And we're really going to get into one of my favorite conversations in terms of accountability. Can we teach it? What can we do about it? And we'll definitely get more into that as we go along, Mandy. So thank you for having me here. As Mandy said, I am the co-host of the HR Stories podcast with my business partner, Chuck Simikian, and friend. We also have written the Ultimate Guide to HR, which is now available on Amazon. So if you haven't got it, picked it up, definitely do that. Here's what I say, Mandy. I don't know if I've said this to you, but I'm like, we wrote a book. I don't want anybody to read it. I want you to use it because that's what it's about, right? And so giving people that actual process that they can use as an HR professional, always beneficial in there. So
100%. The many times I've listened to the podcast, I always learn something in every story that you tell. So definitely check it out, check out the book, and incorporate it into your HR strategy. Um, let's just kind of dive in. We kind of have a general idea. This is some challenges that businesses may face, whether a business of 10 or a business of 100. What are you seeing with some of your clients now?
yeah, it's really interesting. So I was doing some training not that long ago. I was doing some HR training with HR professionals and HR practitioners, and I asked that question, like, what challenges are you going to be facing in 2025? And basically, it's the same thing we've heard before, right? We're concerned about employee turnover. We're concerned about how do we bring more people on? How do we get our employees working at a higher level? And then, of course, right, we're also all concerned about employment law. What do we need to do? And I think it's really important as HR professionals is that we take what's happening in employment law and that we're out there translating it for our employees. What does this mean for us as an organization? What, right? So there's that concern out there as well. So there's a lot of different concerns, but those are the main ones that I'm hearing right now.
Fair enough. I know with some of the smaller businesses that I work with, the main problem is finding good people or keeping good people. And we have talked a couple of times about how there's a difference between bringing on a body to fill a position and then bringing on a lifetime employee that's going to feel and understand your mission and vision and help the business. When you bring on a body, chances are in 3 months' time, you're going to need to find another body to fill that position. So it's always good
Yeah.
to have a growth plan or have some type of way to enhance your current workforce so that they have the skills to be able to make your business successful.
Yeah, I think
Um,
one of the things I always tell HR professionals or even business owners, right, is that when you hire somebody, there should not be an assumption that they can do the job right out of the thing. Even if they're the best person in that role, the best person, when they get into a new company, a new situation, they have to learn about the company logistics, the company culture, all of that stuff. And so, really, training should start on day one, right? It should be part of the company culture. We should start doing it. The other thing that, let's be honest, right? So when we're interviewing and we're hiring somebody, it's very rare that we get the perfect candidate and we're
mhm.
making a choice like, oh, we're going to bring this candidate in, but maybe they don't have great communication skills. And so we should be starting on day one to give them that communication skills so they can get better and just making it part of the organizational culture where everyone is always upskilling, right? They're getting better, they're getting more knowledge, they're training, just makes it very easy for that culture to rise.
100%. 100%. Now I wanted to go into and not to. You and I are really good at having a very elaborate squirrel conversation, so I do want to keep us on track. But what are some of the benefits? We talked about a culture of learning. We talked about employee training starting one. Who would benefit? I want to say everyone, but who would specifically benefit from training, employee training?
I think so. So when I go in and I do an assessment of an organization, and I'm like, does this organization need improved training? And it is very easy for somebody in my role to be like, well, every company does. And I
Mhm.
think that's an over exaggeration. And so what I'm looking at, are there particular issues within the company, right? Is there a problem with communication? Is there a problem with technical knowledge, right? And so, is there a problem with leadership where leadership's not meeting a thing? Are there skill sets that our executives have that they're missing, right? And so, looking at that, doing that assessment becomes really important to kind of look at. And so when I'm working, typically I'm working either with a small business owner or an HR executive or an HR leader or an HR department of one. I really start asking questions like, well, what skills seem to be missing from your thing? Or where is the company going, right? This is that strategic planning. Where
Mhm.
is that company going and what skills are going to be necessary as we go forward, right? And so kind of going there because it's about looking at the skills that are missing and then building training on that. Those are the companies that will benefit from it, right? And so kind of getting in there and looking at that and going, okay, here's what we need to do becomes important. But I think any organization can benefit for it, but it's being very specific on exactly what we're training.
100%. I actually work with quite a few construction companies, and there's a major difference between knowing how to do the job and knowing how to manage someone. And so just because, someone is really, really good at putting up drywall, that it doesn't mean they have the skills necessary yet to manage a team to put up the same drywall. And I have one client who said that their senior executives are about to retire. And it's getting to that point where they need people to step up because it doesn't make any sense to hire out executive or chief executives at this point. It doesn't make any sense to do so. So 100%. I think knowing key competencies and being very specific about what you want to learn or what needs to be learned to reach that level is important.
Yeah, and I think that succession planning is, I mean, you bring that up. It's such an important thing to be thinking about. If we're creating a succession plan for an executive that's leading, or a director level, or even a manager that's leaving, are we giving that person that's moving into that role the option, right? The option to take it on and kind of do that. And so I think that becomes something that you really want to think about when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to have people moving into this role a year from now.
Mhm.
Do they have the necessary skill sets to actually do that role, not their role, right? And kind of looking at that. And so I think that is another way to kind of think about where training can come in and help.
100%. Now, I know that you offer so many different types of trainings, but here are some specifics. So there's in person, there's online, there's gamified, half day, full day. What are some of the ones that are the best ways for employees to learn?
Can I use the old HR term? It depends, right? And it really does depend. It depends on the role. It depends on the individual. It depends on what the organization is trying to do. I don't
Mhm.
think any of them are bad It's just you want to make sure that you're using the right tool for the right situation, right? And so one of the things we talk a lot about, and really our book, the Guide to HR, is about this, is having job aids, right? And so having checklists that you can create and give to that new employee, like this is the
Mm.
first time they're doing a particular task. Job aids are great for learning, right? There's a great way to kind of build that in there. But now maybe we're talking about a really in-depth technical knowledge. And so maybe we want to do that in person, right? We want to make sure that we can actually see what they're doing and how they're doing it and making sure they get that. And then when we get into maybe some of what, the soft skills, I hate to use that term because I don't think they're soft skills, but in terms of we're training leaderships, I do a lot of leadership training. Sometimes that is virtual. Sometimes that's in person. It depends on the organization. It depends on the organizational structure. I was involved in a program where we were doing a global training, right? And so we couldn't do that. I mean, I guess we could have done, we could have brought people into one location, but that just didn't make sense for the company. And so
Mhm.
we were doing virtually, and that makes a lot of sense. And we were doing it regular intervals, and it helped, and the company got better. So I think there's lots of different methods. You have to really pinpoint and go, okay, what's the right method for this situation? And maybe more than one.
Definitely. It could be, if you're bringing training to a call center, recognize that you can't have everyone come off the phones at the same time for HR training. So to be able to recognize that and be able to adapt it. I've heard you say this so many times, but I think no matter what type of training you do, it's all about the follow-up.
Well, and right, I mean, I think it's important, right? We hear this a lot, and I will have to give a shout out to my older brother, who really spends a lot of time in the learning development field, and he always says, like, just because you do the training, you can't expect the person to get better, right? And if you're not following up, you're not reinforcing it, you're not improving this process, then it's you're going to throw it in once, right? And what happens a lot, and this is what I tell people in my workshops, is here's what's going to happen, right? You're gonna learn this new language, you're going to learn this new information, and you're going to come back to your workplace, right? You're going to come back to your workplace, and you're going to try to bring it in. Well, at the same time, this tsunami of stuff, right? All of these other things that you have to be doing is going to be you're going to be captured in that, right? It's going to be this
Mhm.
mess, and you're trying to do it, and you're trying to bring it in. And so I really, when I'm talking to organizations and leaders, I'm really clear that I think the best learning takes place um, within the company, right? And so whether that's
Mhm.
virtual or in person, but it's bringing people in from the same company to teaching them the same techniques, the same language. So then it spreads out in the organization. And then we just have to reinforce it, right? And so, whether that's messaging like, hey, have you done this? Maybe it's a short video after the class going, hey, you were supposed to have an accountability partner. How did that accountability partner go? Right. And so asking that question, because when you're doing that, when you're enforcing it, it becomes much more ingrained in the process.
100%. Getting the managers to understand what people are being taught can also is huge too, because then managers, as they're having those either critical conversations or they're having just performance reviews. They can ask those questions. Well, how did you bring in what you learned in this situation? Is there something you could have done better? Is there something? So it's definitely being able to have someone, as you said, an accountable partner, accountability partner. Yeah. Uh, to be able to keep you on track. 100%. I was part of a sales training years ago, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. I felt inspired after it. If you asked me today, I don't know who spoke, what exactly was said, and I can't even tell you if I actually put it into place. So Having someone to bounce ideas off of and work with is huge when it comes to learning in general.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you bring up a good point, right? Because I think a lot of times we want to send people to training. We want them to get better. But if we, as the leaders or the HR person, is not going, okay, so what did you learn? Come back. And when I was in corporate America, right, I had a big team when I was in corporate America, and I would always send my people to training, but I would always caution them before they went, like, my expectation is you're going to bring something back and you're going to do a knowledge share to the rest of the team. And that helps
Mhm.
them reinforce it, right? That knowledge share is all part of that learning and doing it and getting up. But it also helped everyone else to see, oh, well, now, yeah, how can we incorporate that? Oh, that's really important. And then we built on that training and learning. So it's another way to kind of bring that across, I think.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Now that and you bring up a really good point, and it brings us to the first training that we're going to kind of go over, which is um, oh, let's go back into the benefits and why invest in training, because we talked about retention of good employees. We talked about giving the skills needed for employees to step up to meet those demands of the position or a new position and keep them engaged. Um, what are some specifics that you would like to include on the investment and the ROI of investment?
Yeah, right. Because that's the executive, right? The executive is going to ask, what's the return on the investment? If we do this training, what's the return on investment? And I said this to you the other day, Mandi, and I just think it's so, I'm sure people have heard this, but I think it's so impactful. There was a conversation going on between a CEO and a CFO, right? And the CFO is that financial person, right? They don't want to spend money, right? Typically, they're like, I don't want no money I'm going to spend, right? And so they're like, CEO, when we train the people, they leave the organization. Why am I spending money if they're going to leave the organization down the road? And the CEO kind of turns to the CFO and says, what happens if they stay and we don't train them? And to me, thinking about that impact, right? So you're not doing it.
Mhm.
And so we can see, right, when we look at training, if we improve, let's say there's 100 employees, right? Let's say we're training 100 employees in your organization and we improve their productivity by 1%. Think about all of that productivity that's going to go across your organization if it's only across 1%, right? And so typically when we're going in and we're training somebody on a particular skill set, we expect them to be able to improve their performance at work. And that could be, depending on what it is, right? It could be better engagement in the processes. It could be better work with their coworkers. But we know in the end, it improves the organization's outcomes. It's as simple as that.
It's amazing. Just in my personal life, I just hope to be 1% better every day. I maybe
Yeah.
get a percent better on a regular basis, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to go back and backtrack because you had brought up being an accountability partner. Um, the whole idea in investing in your team is to have your team have some type of ownership of what they do so that they want to do better and get that 1% better. Which kind of brings us to accountability and mastering accountability. Um, John, what exactly, since I know you've taught this class and coachability for years now, what exactly is accountability and why does it matter?
Yeah, and what is account? I mean, I think it's a great question, right? And I think it's an important question for us to understand. And I'm not going to answer it right away because I want to talk about ideally, right? Ideally, we want our employees to consistently make the right decisions, right? And so we can do that in many different ways. But when we give them accountability, they now take ownership over those decisions, right? And so that's what accountability is. I'm taking ownership of the behavioral decisions I made. Right? And so that means I should get rewarded if I do really well. And if I mess up, I should feel the consequences for that, right? And so ownership is really about being answerable to myself, to the team that I'm on, to the organizational goals, and probably to our customers and our clients. We need to make sure that we're being accountable for them and following through on our decisions.
100%. I know that we kind of labeled it as an entry level type of training, but I think accountability is so important for every tier in an organization to be able to have that ownership of what you do, be able to um, take a step back and recognize when something didn't work or you did something wrong, and then just being proactive in trying to do the next best thing to make it
Yeah, and
better.
I think, I mean, again, right? Let's talk about shadow of the leader, right? If my leader, so my team leader is not accountable for their action, right? They are it's their fault, right? And right, and it happens, right? We see these team leaders go, well, it's my team's fault, or well, it's the boss's fault, right? Never taking accountability for their own actions. What happens now is their peers, their direct reports are like, well, why am I taking accountability? We'll play the blame game. And all of a sudden, the company starts following down this blame game, and no one is the problem. Everyone's the problem, right? And so if you're not like, well, you know what? I messed up, or it was my idea. I thought it was going to work. It didn't work. Or, man, that worked. I'm fantastic. I'm happy that happened. We Taking accountability is one of those life skills that
Mhm.
can be taught at any age, right? Can be taught at any age, but being aware of that accountability culture, I think, is the important part. So let me just throw out some statistics here, Mandi, because I do
Please.
want to kind of talk about this, right? And so Gallup says that 85% of coworkers are likely to be engaged in organizations with a culture of accountability, which leads to better performance. Harvard Business Review says 78% of leaders who practice accountability increase trust. And we know that trust is one of, if not the major factor in engagement and performance and building teams. And there's so many things that trust we need to do. And so teaching people how to be trustworthy, right? And trustworthy and accountability go hand in hand, teaching
Mhm.
them that and being aware, like, okay, and it goes to, you and I talked about this because a lot of the accountability workshop that I do also goes into my coachability workshop, which is basically people taking control of their own career. And so when we teach people to take control of their own career in our organization, it builds them up. It gives them accountability. They understand what they need to do to get to wherever they want to go.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I know we've touched on this in past conversations, and I know we can go down a tunnel, but I do want to bring up creating a culture that allows people to be accountable in a safe space. Because the only way that someone's going to actually truly be accountable and learn from their lesson and do better is if um, they can feel consequences, but it's not going to prevent them from trying again and trying to do better.
Right,
I
right. And so
know
the term
psychological.
safety, yeah, psychological safety is such an important term, and it comes out of, and I wish I could remember her name, but it comes out of a Harvard professor's work, and she was not looking at teams per se, right, long situated teams, but more about teaming and what allowed individuals that are coming onto a team or being part of this team to be successful. And what she found was psychological safety is the critical factor that allows people to feel confident. And psychological safety is, I feel that I'm going to be supported by my teammates even when I make a mistake. Right. And so it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to fail at something because my team's got me. and they're going to understand, and we're going to work together. And that doesn't mean like, oh, I made a mistake and that's not my fault. It's I made a mistake, but my team's going to support me at the same time, right? And so we're going to figure out how to get better and do it. And it's something that it's really important to create that psychological safety on our team. And it really does go hand in hand with accountability. So Google did a study. So Google has what, 20,000 employees. And so they have a bunch of teams, and they wanted to see if this Harvard professor, the ideas and concept played out in real life. So they did this study, and they found out that yes, psychological safety is one of the key factors, right, which goes to trust, to building strong teams. Yeah.
It seems to make all the sense in the world. And sometimes we just need to hear it from someone who's trained to teach it or train it, and to be able to incorporate it. So when it comes to your accountability, I have a couple of results of deliverables that businesses could possibly be able to see and expect from having such trainings. What are some of the other deliverables do you think are important for business owners to understand?
Well, so as a business owner, right? As a business owner, we want to work on our business, not in our business. And for us not to work on our business, I mean, in our business, we need to be able to have people that are accountable to take, like, hey, this is your project. You go do it and run with it. Here's the results I want, right? And so when I'm working with a leader and we're defining their role in the organization, an
Mhm.
accountable leader, when I tell them, here's the results that I need from you, when I set clear expectations with them, they are, if they're an accountable leader, I've given them that they're going to get there, right? They're going to get there based on me setting the expectations. I don't need to spend a lot of time, maybe in the beginning, but afterwards, I don't need to spend a lot of time with them. They're accountable. They're going to do it. They're going to bring me back where they are. And if things are not going the way we want them to, they're going to be
Mhm.
up in front about it, right? I don't have to mistrust anybody. Accountability really gives me that opportunity as a small business owner to work on my business instead of working in and going, oh, well, let me go see what they're doing this week. And did they do what they said they were going to do? And gosh, I better go check in with the clients to make sure they're getting things done. And so having accountability leaders, accountability employees really does relieve some of that, right? And so I'm a team
Mhm.
lead and I know my staff is accountable. It opens up possibilities for me, right? It opens up this. I I now know I've given them their expectations. I know they're doing their job. I'm not following up. I'm not spending my time, and that opens up my calendar to be like, oh, well, we got this new project, or boss, how can I support you? I have some free time. My team's killing it over here. How can I do that?
That's amazing because I can't tell you how many business owners I've talked to that think that micromanaging everything that their employees are doing is actually hindering their growth, and the possibilities that their employees would be able to present and offer to the company, and the productivity, in
Yeah.
general, for the company. So that is absolutely awesome. You touched on a couple of things that kind of leads us into the next type of training. But I do see here that we did get a question. Isn't training too time consuming?
Yeah. um, here's what I say. So, Mandy, I teach a class called Priority Management. And I always say in the beginning of that class, like, there's a high expectation, right? There's a high expectation that I am going to save them time. I'm going to make their life more efficient. And if I don't, they're gonna look to me, right? Because I'm gonna there. And I think that's the same thing with training, right? You're giving them new skills that they're going to put to use, that's going to make them more effective in their role. And if we're more effective, we're managing our time better, we're getting the things done that needs to be done. And so, yes, it takes time. It's like any activity, right? It's any activity. Think about when you learned how to ride a bicycle. You didn't
Yeah.
just get on the bike and go. It took a while to build up to where you were comfortable and confident in riding that bike. The same thing with a leadership skill or a training skill or customer service or communication skills. It takes a while to build it up, but in time you become much more effective in there.
So once again, it's looking on the return of investment. This is
Yeah,
investing your time,
it's
and
a
then you'll be able to see it in the back end.
yeah. I have a story. I don't. I guess I have. Well, I'll try to sell the short story. We're going down the rabbit hole. But so when I back in the day, I was a theater person, right? So I did a lot of technical
Mhm.
theater, and I remember we were doing this one production, and I was in charge of the crew that was changing the sets between the acts, right? And so typically you have about 15 minutes to change the sets. And we had these gigantic sets, they needed to be changed. And the first time we did the dress rehearsal, it took us an hour and 15 minutes to change the set around, right? Because we had to learn the patterns, we had to learn where things go. By the time we got to opening night, 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Right. And it because it was that learning and building and getting that repetition and really thinking about, okay, what's the more effective way to do this?
100%. With my
Yeah.
background in events, I
Yeah. Yeah.
completely
Right.
understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We can definitely run down those rabbit holes. So let's go
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
next type of
Right.
training, which you touched on leadership training. So I'd like for you to kind of explain what that looks like.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. And this is the myth of most organizations will look for a subject matter expert, somebody that is really good at their job. I think you said it earlier, somebody that's really good at drywall, and then we'll promote them into the role of leader. And here's the thing, we don't give them any training. We're like, you're the leader now. They don't know what to do. No one's training them. No one's showing them, how do I influence people? How do I set goals for my team? How do I make sure they're motivated? What happens when I have to have a difficult conversation because they're not performing well? That to me is one of the fallacies that we have to stop, right? And so
Mhm.
I would always look around, right? When I was corporate America, I was always looking around not for the subject matter expert, but I was looking for the person that people naturally followed because I knew that person could be a good leader, right? And so maybe they're not really good at putting up drywall. Maybe they can do it, but they're not really good at it, right? They're not the subject matter expert, but they're really getting the team to work together and they know how to motivate people and they know how to influence people to do a certain things a certain ways, right? Those are the individuals that I want to see as a leader, right? So when I'm thinking about leadership training, I go through some very specific things and it talks about how do we perform, right? Who we are, right? Because our perspectives as a leader is going to be different than our employees. And so we have to figure out that difference, right? And that gap there and really work on that and then give them the tools and the knowledge and the abilities to be a good leader.
100%. I hope you also put in there delegation of tasks, because
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
right.
something
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that leaders really
And
need
I
to
think
do.
what happens, right, with subject matter experts, when they're promoted into a role,
Mhm.
they have a very specific way they think things need to be done and will not delegate. So I do a lot of coaching with leaders, right? And so and one of the things they're saying, like I got this all the time, like, oh, I'm working way too many hours. And I'm like, are you delegating to your team? Well, I delegate, but they don't do it the right way. So I end up fixing it. And it frustrates me because that's not the answer. The answer is to teach them, this is the result I need. You figure out how you're going to get it. It doesn't need to be done specifically as the leader wants, but we can delegate in that responsibility. So all that needs to be taught and brought along to be like, okay, this is going to help me get into that better place.
100%. We talk about, I talk about small companies and how so many people are wearing different hats. Well, when you have that individual that is supposed to be teaching or training someone, and then they just kind of take everything on as their responsibility, overwhelmed, they're getting burnt out. People that they're supposed to be managing are saying, well, there's nothing really here for me. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know how to do it well, or I'm always doing it wrong, or at least that's what I'm being told. And it
Right.
doesn't set up that positive work environment that helps everyone stay engaged and want to do well.
Yeah,
So
right. And
I
that's part of the role as a leader, right? Yeah,
Go figure. Go
absolutely.
figure.
Yeah.
Now, we do have a couple of deliverables that people can expect to see. But one of the things that I was really intrigued about is 40% improvement in employee engagement scores and 20% reduction in turnover rates. We have so many industries right now that are struggling to get the right people in the door and attracting good people. The idea that with some simple training on skill sets like leadership to help, it would actually reduce the turnover rate of a company is mind blowing.
Yeah, you think about it, right? And so Gallup, or the Gallup organization, does this poll in terms of employee engagement and that kind of stuff. And so they wanted to know what was the lever that mattered the most when it came to employees' engagement. 70% of an employee's engagement comes from the direct manager.
Mm,
I'm going to
yep.
say it again. It's one of my favorite statistics. 70% of an employee's engagement, the employee's effort, comes directly from their direct supervisor, right? And so if that direct supervisor is a lousy manager, you have a problem in your organization. You have a problem that that whole team is going to fail or struggle. And if I see a high rate of turnover, I'm looking at the manager. I'm looking at the supervisor. What's going wrong there? What's happening that people are leaving? And if they come back to me and say, well, the job's terrible, then change the job. Make it better. How do you do that? How do you get there as well? And so working with leaders and managers, there's such, like, to me, if I think about one place, if I'm going to put effort, right? And so a lot of times when we're talking to organizations, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but when we're talking to organizations, we see, oh, I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of getting my leaders a executive coach. Now, that's great, right? I'm an executive coach. I love working with leaders and that kind of stuff. And then I see a lot of well, we need to teach the new employees and the frontline employees, we need to teach them skills. Well, that's sorry, John, we don't have any money to train the supervisors and managers. I would reverse that and I would put all my money into training my supervisors and managers, not all of it, but most of my money in training my supervisors and managers. And here's why: because a good, well trained manager can train your team so the employees can get better because they're naturally training them, they're
Mhm.
doing that. And then when we think about the succession plan, you're preparing that manager to take over their director level, the VP level, the CEO level, right? You're preparing them at that level and you're giving them experience to move along.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
It's funny. We got a question about leadership training, or yeah, leadership training is just too expensive. And I'm going to kind of refer back to our conversation about the return of investment, and what you bring to the table is what you're going to get in the long run. Do you have anything to add?
No, it goes back to what I said with the CEO and CFO, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think right? It's the again, you don't want to be nilly, like throw it out, like, oh, we're just going to keep training people. If you're not seeing any return on the investment, then you're not in the right place. But I do think leadership training is so worth the effort and the investment. If you're going to improve employee engagement, I say 10%. That's going to improve your overall organization. You improve employee engagement because you improve your managers and leaders. We know 70% of an employee's effort comes from that direct supervisor. And if you're training them to get better, you're going to do it. The other thing that's happening, you're reducing your turnover cost, right? And so there's lots of stats and figures out there, anywhere from 30% of a salary to 400% of the salary, depending on the level of the organization. But that's a lot of cost. Turnover is a lot, right? And you have that gap possibly for months on time, especially in this environment right now.
Exactly. Which is, it's kind of funny because this really does lead us into the next type of training. And when I heard the idea of change management, and didn't quite understand it, but the more that I understand it, I'm like, oh, this needs to be taught to everyone just for their personal lives in general. But I'd love for you, because I know we're getting down to our last 15 minutes. John, I'd love for you to give some light as to what change management is and why it's so very important.
Right. So you think of an organization, right? You think of an organization, and no organization, very few organizations are completely static, right? We think about, there was a company the other day, and I forgot the name of it, but they have been around for like 150 years, right? And so if you look back, right? If we look back at our company, let's go back 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? We look back, that company has changed, right? And so there's a lot of times we're putting in new processes. We're asking employees to do new things. We're changing the way we do something. Some of the great words are like, we're evolving this process. We're improving this process. We're doing a process improvement. All of those things, right? When we're improving a process, the one thing that needs to go alongside of that is change management. Change management focuses on the people side of change. And so here's a real simple story. I was working for a big corporation, and this was back in the day. We decided that we were going to pay all of our employees in direct deposit. You would think that would be a simple thing. But what we found was that, one, in some areas it wasn't well communicated that we were doing. There was not awareness that this change was necessary. We were going to save the company, I think, probably like $100,000, $500,000 a year by doing this, right? And so we then had to convince the employees that was going to be beneficial to them. Like, what's the why behind it? Why are we doing this? How is it going to benefit me? And we're like, you're going to get your money day of. You don't have to go to the bank, check, deposit your paying, go down there, right? You don't have to do that anymore. You'll have that money come directly in your account. But here's the thing that got us, or got me anyway, was that there were some individuals that were resistant to this change. As any change, there's always going to be somebody resistant. And in some of those cases, it's because they didn't have the knowledge that was necessary to fill out the direct deposit form. They're like, I don't know what a routing number is. What is this ABA? Like, where do I get that? And so we had to spell it out for them, which is something that we missed because we're like, oh, everyone knows that. And so a lot of times when you're doing change management, it's not about just about, oh, by the way, everyone, we're going to do this differently. We have to go through the process, and we have to look at, are they aware of the necessity for the change? Do they understand what's in it for them, right? Do they understand there's a desire for that change? It's going to make their life better, or it's going to make the organizational life better, and maybe we're going to have to, maybe deal with some own in our role issues, but maybe there. And then are we giving them the knowledge so they can make the change, and the skill set, they can make the change as well, right? And so we're talking today a lot about training. Part of change management is giving them the skill sets to do that, right? And so we're going to have an accountability culture, right? That's the change we want to bring to my organization. We need to teach them how to be accountable. We can't like, well, we just want you to be accountable. We need to teach them that skill to do that. And then, Mandi, as you said earlier, it's all about reinforcement, reinforcement, right? Follow up, follow up, follow up. And so change management is one of those skill sets that leaders need to learn. They need to understand what works and what doesn't. There's a lot of research out there on it. But if we're not paying attention in how to do it, it misses, right?
100%. One of the things that you were mentioning is how the difficulty of change in general. What I find with change management when it comes to smaller businesses is just the ability to step back and see that there might be a benefit in changing. I had I feel like the death of every business is when a business owner is saying, well, this is how I've always done it, and this is just the way it's going to be done. Um, so, I mean, it's about being able to pivot and adapt. And
Yeah.
it's all about communication and learning. So whether it's the employee or the actual owner, being able to ask those questions and recognize, well, you know what, something may need to change to be able to make this more efficient, to make my life better.
Yeah, and
So
it goes to it also goes to values, right? So
yes,
I've worked at companies that one of the values was adaptability, flexibility, and it made innovation a much easier part of the process. Where some companies don't have that value, and then change becomes a little bit harder. You could still do it; it's just a little bit harder. And so thinking about, gosh, how do my values go to change management? Values go to accountability, leadership training, right? All of that should be part of that process and conversation.
100%. I know we're slowly running out of time, so I want to hit on some of the deliverables, simply because I think that they're important. But a faster adoption of new systems and processes, how much of a change that could be, whether it's 25% increase in operational efficiency, um, because of the change. I know that you've got your statistics. What do you got for me, John?
Well, actually, I was thinking of a story. So I was part of this big change management at an organization I was working, right? So we're doing this big change management, and we didn't do it well. I'll just throw it out there. We didn't do it well. This was years ago. And it was funny because we tried this, we were changing a process, right? And so we wanted to make the company more process oriented. And so we had created this process that everyone was supposed to follow. But here's what was happening is individuals would get stuck in a process and they're like, all right, well, I'm stuck. Let me go reach out to this person because this is the person that used to do it. And so I know they're going to help me, right? That's the person I used to always go to. So blah, blah, blah. And so what was happening is we were taking this, and if you think about like a process line, they were going up here and then coming back to do it. And so I went and talked to one of the vice presidents who was in charge of this process, and I'm like, so what do you think happened? And he goes, we did not take into account that we were a people oriented company and not a process oriented company. And so people were going to the people they knew to get things done. And so we really, in that case, we bit off more than we can chew. But what I have found since then, right now, I kind of go through that and I always keep that in mind. When you put in, uh, when you run change management along with a process change, that process change is much more effective than if you don't do that change management, right? And so kind of having
Mm.
that there becomes really beneficial to kind of make that there.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And what I love about after many times we've talked is that all of your training courses are customizable. So it's about truly understanding where each client is, what's most important, what are the values, and being able to incorporate that into the training so that really does hit home and it's not just something out of the box already pre-made.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love, and I think you and Mandy, I had this conversation, but one of the things I love is sitting down with the business owner or the HR person and going, all right, what do you want to happen? What is the result that you're looking for? Now let's create training that's going to make that happen, right? Because I could come in and I could go and do a communication class tomorrow in your organization, but that may not be what you're looking for, and it may not be the skill sets that we really want to address. And sometimes I did a 1 week leadership retreat for a small organization in Tennessee.
Mhm.
And one of the things was is they wanted to incorporate, we're doing strategic planning, but there were some definitely concerns about communication. There were concerns about working together. There was all these concerns. When I was talking to the HR person, I could have went in just at a 1 week strategic planning, blah blah blah, and I'm like, we need to incorporate emotional intelligence. We need to incorporate having difficult conversations in there. And when we did, the strategic plan got better because we were teaching those skill sets, right? And so having that in there, I think, is always beneficial to do.
100%. And that's kind of where um and we're I, all right. So that kind of leads into fostering a culture of continuous learning. You may say that this is what you need. This is, what everyone should be at. But if you're creating a culture, then you're taking different pieces and you're adapting them to what your actual needs are. And then you're looking to learn more. And the more you learn, the better the whole team works together.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think, to me, that fostering a continuous learning culture really has to be, again, right, with any cultural stuff, right? When we're trying to look at company culture and give it purpose and meaning and trying to do that, I always think of culture as, what does it feel like for two employees working at a company, right? What does it feel like there? But I do think there are things that leadership and HR and managers can do to influence the culture so it's better. And one of the things is, it has to be from day one when an employee starts, it has to be one of the things that they're rewarded for and recognized for is learning new skills. And that has to go up to the leadership. Like, the leadership needs to be like, hey, I'm going to John's class on. I love when leaders come into that class, not as, oh, I'm going to give a speech and then leave, but they come in and they participate through the whole day and they learn things and they go, oh man, that's new. And I didn't think about that. And that's a great way to kind of do that, because everyone in that room now goes back to everyone else in the company and goes, hey, Mandi was there. She was talking about, like, man, she was learning. I feel now like, oh, I better learn too, because everyone in my leadership team is doing it as well.
I think that it should be in the job description to really help
Mm.
bring someone on that is interested in continuously learning, is interested in engaging and grow with the company. If it's part of your what sets you apart, that differentiator as to why a good candidate would go with your company, I think you should be singing it from the rooftops because I think that
Yeah, and
it's
I
huge.
love that you're taking it even before they start, like hiring the people that want to learn and be curious and do that, especially for small businesses, because as
Mhm.
you said earlier, small business employees are taking on multiple hats, right? And so maybe they come in with a skill set, but they could learn a particular ability or knowledge which could help you in your company that maybe you didn't see before, right? And so I love that. asking them before and during the hiring process, like, how do you learn new things? What did you learn lately, right? And so that'd be a great question.
All right. I, John, I want to thank you. I mean, like I said, we could always go on forever. I do want to point out some summary of key points. Accountability training focuses on ownership, communication, and proactive problem solving. The ROI of leadership training includes reduced turnover costs and increased productivity from engaged employees. And lastly, unmanaged change can lead to resistance, delays, and financial losses, while structured change management ensures smoother transitions and better results. I can't thank you enough, John, for joining me today. If you are a business owner that wears lots of hats, or a HR department of one, or just someone who's doing HR and many other things, and you're trying to figure out which HR training would be best for your organization, feel free to reach out to Merit Business Solutions. And also, John, it was very nice to offer. You can send out an email to connect@mbshrpartners.com for a free leadership training and development assessment. Thank you so much. It is 3 o'clock. Have a great and wonderful rest of your week, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here.